Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Transport Focus webinar. We've got a few people still just joining us, so we'll give people a minute just to drop in. I can see the numbers still ticking up a little bit there. Okay, so we're at a couple of minutes past 2, so I think we'll get started and people can still join us as we're going along. So welcome and thank you very much for attending this webinar, in which we'll explore some of the themes coming out of the Your Bus Journey results for 2025. So we published the results about a month ago, of course, and I'm sure that most people on this call have at least seen the headline results and know that we've got some really positive stories coming out of them. And of course, we're in the third year of the survey now, so I'm pleased that we're able to see the work of the last few years paying off. Investment that's been made in bus and hardware for authorities and operators is really paying off now with substantial improvements in passenger satisfaction. Really demonstrates the value of tracking this consistently over time so that we can see the work that's taking place, genuinely delivering for passengers. So I'm Louise Collins, Director of Transport Focus, and I'm being joined today by a team who I'll introduce as we go on, who are going to talk through some of those results. And I guess looking ahead to the survey in 2026, as you probably know, lots of you on this call, the Department for Transport has asked that every authority in England participate in the survey so that we can track and benchmark even more consistently in future, which is great news. And I know that for some areas, the changes to the survey have presented challenges and that there have been some issues to deal with. So, I mean, first of all, just to thank everybody for working with us on this when it's been quite challenging. I'm sorry, I can see a few people saying there's problems with sound, but I think for most it is working, so hopefully that's okay. Yeah, so some challenges I know for someone else is having problems with sound. Let's just let me just have a quick look in the chat before we carry on too much further to check. If anyone else has got problems with sound, they wouldn't be able to hear me. Ask them, would they? So put it in the chat. That was a stupid thing to say. Okay, a couple of people
Louise,
trying to rejoin.
Just jumping in there, Louise. I had the same issue when I watched our webinar last week. You can not unmuting yourself. You're sometimes it defaults to turn off your microphones, the sound. So you may need, if you had a message about turning on the.
You'd have to put that in the chat, Robert, for anyone who can't hear, of course. Okay, I think most people are saying they can hear, so let's carry on. And this will be captured on the recording, won't it? Okay, but I'll backtrack very slightly for people who maybe have had to drop out and rejoin, just to make sure people know where we're up to. So looking ahead to the survey in 2026, and as you know, the Department for Transport has asked that authorities in England participate in the survey. Great news that we'll be able to do that tracking and benchmarking very consistently in future. And for some people, there've been a few challenges, and everyone's been working with us so constructively on it. And so just thank you very much for all the areas who've been working with us to get that sorted. And I know the team are still talking to some areas. And, please feel free, anyone, to drop me a line if there's anything that you would like to discuss with me separately about the 2026 survey. But the thing I really want to share, the good news, is that the survey started on schedule at the beginning of April, and it is in the field across England, Scotland and Wales. So we're gathering in the results for 2026 as we speak. So thanks for everyone who's been part of making that happen. And then still looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, Transport Focus is taking on an enhanced role to support better bus passenger experience in England. Some of you will have already heard a bit about this, or some of you this might be new. So this new programme of work will involve us bringing together the Your Bus Journey results, some other new passenger insights, and analysis of performance data alongside really collaborative engagement with local transport authorities and operators. So we're still in the early stages of planning what that will look like, but I guess the types of things it could include would be us carrying out some deep dive analysis to better understand what the data tells us in a particular area, sharing what we learn through examples of best practice. We might carry out additional research to explore particular topics of local or national concern. But the key to it all will be close engagement with local authorities and transport operators. And we really want to work together to sort of better understand the link between performance and passenger experience, and ultimately to improve outcomes for passengers. And as I said, that's in its very early stages. We want to develop this programme of work with you. So we've already been in contact with some people to ask you to work with us, and thanks to everyone who's said they'll help so far. We'll be talking to everyone as this develops. So please, what we ask of you, I guess, is to engage openly, provide constructive challenge as we progress this work, and there'll be more detail to follow on that. And yes, you should still be on the first slide. We've not moved on through that. So you're still in the right place if you've just joined and you're still seeing a welcome screen. So back to the purpose of today's webinar, that was a bit of background, I guess, and some other news, but back to the purpose of today's webinar, it's about going through the headlines from the 2025 results. We want to look in more depth at some key themes, help you to see some of those national trends and talk through them with us in a bit more detail. This obviously isn't going to uncover kind of all the individual detail in your local area. We'll maybe touch a bit more on how you can kind of do that yourself. Some of this is about giving you ideas of what you might want to go away and look at in your own data. You can put questions in the chat. We've left a bit of time at the end, so if you've got stuff that you want to ask, then we can try and work through that at the end. We'll be recording, we'll send out the slides afterwards. Everyone can see our slight tech problems at the beginning and laugh along with us. But let me now introduce the team who are going to take us through the presentation today. So we've got David Beer, who our Senior Engagement Manager, who leads on the engagement side of the Your Bus Journey programme. Lots of you will know him. And then we've got Becky Lewis and Robert Payne. They're from our Insight team and they lead the Your Bus Journey research. So I'm going to hand over to David first.
Thanks, Louise, and hopefully the slide has now moved on for everybody. So we are going to go through the Your Bus Journey 2025 results, as Louise has said, and concentrate on some of the key themes and trends that shows us. Here's the agenda. So I'm going to take us through in a second what Your Bus Journey is all about. Then we're going to go through the results with key themes and trends. Some of the sort of thoughts that we're putting through in terms of how partners are using it, and some of the engagement team looking at the how those are being put into action and the measures that people are using. And then we'll round it up and take the next steps. And as Louise has said, leave some time at the end for questions and answers. Please do write questions in the chat and we'll pick them up from there. So, Your Bus Journey, what is it all about? Well, Transport Focus, as the independent consumer organisation representing the interests of bus passengers, we use the results from this to understand the experience of the passenger and listen to their voice as part of our consumer advocacy. We hope that the results will be trusted. We hope that they'll have influence and be respected for what we're trying to do with those. We use professional market research suppliers to conduct the survey on the ground and collect those and process the responses. And then from there, we analyse the results. The survey builds on our knowledge and experience. We've been gathering passenger feedback in a similar sort of way since 2010. So this has quite a pedigree behind it as well. And as part of what we do, we publish the survey results, making them transparent and available to transport users, to bus operators, transport authorities, and also to government and other industry stakeholders, to spread them as widely as possible, to share that understanding. In the 2025 results, 48 areas took part in England. and 6 in Scotland. Wales didn't take part in the 2025 survey, but they did in 2024 and will be doing so again 2026. And from those results, we've had over 50,000 results from passengers. They're giving us their feedback on actual journeys that they're making. We recruit passengers face to face, ask them to take part in the survey, both at bus stops and on board buses. So it's verified that they're actually making journeys and giving us feedback about those journeys that they're making. And it's inclusive as well. We provide the questionnaire on paper as well as asking people to do it online. And we provide that in a way that encourages people to take part with structured survey questions, focusing on the essential measures of satisfaction, but also then following on with more detailed questions. And passengers are encouraged to tell us in their own words as well what was good or what stood out about the journey that they were making. And then from those results, we provide those robust metrics that areas are already using with their bus service improvement plans through their enhanced partnerships, and looking at the areas that are now moving into franchising as well. The continuous fieldwork builds through the year, and we provide that support and approach to areas as that continues. The questions build over time across all the areas. And as the years build up as well, it allows us to have that trend analysis, which can then give that comparison across areas against other nations as well, and helped for us all to make a difference for transport users. So I hope that gives you a flavour of what your bus journey is about, particularly if you're new to this. Hopefully those who have been part of it before recognise that that is the work that we are doing together, and we look forward to working with you as the survey continues. So I'll hand over now to Becky Lewis, who will start to take us through some of the results. Becky.
Thanks, David. So I'm going to look at some of the results. So starting with overall satisfaction. And as David was saying, this is the satisfaction with the journey just made. And we asked passengers on a 5-point scale, so from very satisfied. And the percentage in the bubble here, 85%, is those who were, it's top 2 box, satisfaction with the journey. But you can see that it's high, generally high, and actually in England, 50% were very satisfied. There's low level dissatisfaction with the actual journey that's just been made. So overall last year was 6%. And as a reminder, when we say England, it's the areas that took part in the 2025 survey. And then for the Scotland results, it's the 6 regional transport partnerships that took part. So when we calculate the England or the Scotland score, we use weighting to make sure it's proportionate to each area for the number of passenger journeys that are represented in that total set of areas surveyed. And those journey numbers are from DFT bus statistics. So, but I'll just talk about England when I say England. So overall satisfaction in England has improved year on year for the last 2 years. It was 85% this year, and that was up from 83% in 2024 and 80% in 2023. But it does vary across the country, across the nations. In England, it ranged from 93% in Warwickshire and Greater Nottingham to 73%. Scotland, overall satisfaction has seen a really big increase in 2025 to 91%, and that was up from 86% in 2024 and 2023. And all the regional transport partnerships in Scotland have seen an increase in overall satisfaction this year compared with last year. So, as well as talking about the national average, we also look at competitor groups in England. So this is based on whether they're urban or rural. We actually have these 4 categories, and some examples of the areas in each category are shown. It's a random choice of the areas in the category. There are more in each. So, and overall satisfaction does differ by type of area. So we tend to see the lowest satisfaction scores in urban metropolitan areas. So on average, they were 84% this year, and semi-rurals often tend to have the highest, and they were the highest at 88% this year. But this kind of masks one of the really key stories from this year, from 2025, is that the urban metropolitan areas have had some really big increases in overall satisfaction this year compared to last year. So on average, they've increased by 4 percentage points. It's up to 84 from 80% last year, 78% the year before. And actually some urban metropolitan areas have had really notable increases, such as Greater Manchester has gone up 7 percentage points, Liverpool 4 percentage points, and West Yorkshire 4 percentage points. Some of the other urban areas also had some big increases. So it's just like, as the improvements have been made over the last couple of years, it's now being reflected in the overall satisfaction scores. So whilst rural and semi-rural areas are higher, they're at the same average as last year. But they had seen bigger jumps before. Okay. So we can also break down overall satisfaction by different types of passengers. They're not all reporting the same experience. So we can see the total, which is the circle on the left, 85% satisfied with the journey that they'd just made. Probably come as no surprise that passengers travelling peak hours are less likely to be satisfied than those in off-peak hours. So it's 82% in peak, 86% off-peak. But I think what's is good, is encouraging this year, is that the peak time travellers' satisfaction has increased this year. So it was 78% last year. So that's a 4 percentage point jump. So whereas the off-peak increase has been slightly less. So again, the bus improvements that have been made over the last couple of years are beginning to make a difference to peak travellers, so, which is about 3 in 10 of the passengers in England. So again, maybe not surprising, those on a free pass are more likely to be satisfied than those paying for the fare, but obviously they're also more likely to be travelling off-peak. Age is another area where there are some differences in satisfaction. Younger passengers are less satisfied with their bus journey. The over 65s tend to be more satisfied. They do tend to be travelling off-peak. There is a higher proportion of the 16 to 25-year-olds in urban metropolitan areas than other areas, and the least in semi-rural areas. So that's kind of wrapped up with some of those overall satisfaction scores as well. So whilst there are bus improvements that have been made across the country, each area will have improvements that impact their passengers to different extents or different degrees. So, and we're going to come back to the gap between disabled and non-disabled passengers, because that's something that we're looking into in a lot more detail. But before that, what is driving satisfaction and dissatisfaction? So David was saying that we do ask a question very near the beginning of the survey about what was the sort of the, in your own words, what was the key thing that was good or bad about the journey. And among those who then say that they were dissatisfied with their bus journey, 37% made a negative comment about the punctuality. And this is the blue bars on the right. So these are when we get the comments, we code them into categories. So they've been, although they were said in their own words, they've been coded into these categories. And then on the blue bars are negative comments from people that were not satisfied with their journey. And as you can see, punctuality really is the main reason that's on the top of the passengers' heads about why they thought that journey was bad. When we look at those who said they were satisfied with their journey, so that's the green bars, and the positive comments they made, punctuality is also the main thing that was why the good thing about their journey, although they do also quite often mention the bus driver. And this is pretty much in line with what we've seen in 2024 as well. Okay, so we've taken this a step further and we've done some additional key driver analysis. So clever statistics that I'm not going to go into the complete detail of, but it helps to prove this association with punctuality and journey time on overall satisfaction. So in the whole questionnaire, we have 22 rating questions and we grouped them into 8 themes. And you can see those themes here. So punctuality, journey length, bus driver, value for money. And then we determine the relative strength of association each of these themes has on the overall journey satisfaction. And the bubble, the size of the bubble basically shows how related the theme is to overall satisfaction with the journey. So you can see the punctuality, those red bubbles are a lot bigger, and that's because punctuality is really driving overall journey satisfaction. So the top rows here are what makes a good journey. So this is passengers that were satisfied, those top 2 boxes. And then the bottom row is what makes a great journey. So these are people who were very satisfied with their journey. And you can see that then journey length actually is almost as important as punctuality. Now I said that it was a theme, so the theme of punctuality is made up of wait time at the stop and the punctuality of the bus. I'm going to talk about those in a little bit more detail as well. Journey length is actually satisfaction with the length of time the journey took. Then bus driver comes next, the little purple bubbles. So although important, you can see like in relative size compared to punctuality and journey length that it's not quite as large. And the bus driver theme is made up of a number of things actually, such as how helpful the driver is, the time that was given for the passenger to get to their seat, how near to the curb the driver parked, and the smoothness of the journey. Just seen that one question about how similar these were across different areas. So we'll be sending out these, we have done this for every area as well as for England as all. It tends to be pretty much the same pattern, although the relative size does differ in different areas. So when the areas get their report, they'll be able to see that. And like obviously it's the overall things, but you'll be able to see where your area is slightly different. Okay, so punctuality is important, we get this. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So we have what we call the key metrics, and these are questions that are asked at the start of the questionnaire, and so we have overall satisfaction, satisfaction with value for money, which we'll come to, and then these other satisfaction with these 5 areas. And the 2 in the green bubble are the ones that are punctuality, so satisfaction with the length of time you had to wait for your bus, and satisfaction with punctuality at the bus at the stop. So we have had notable increases this year. So wait time has increased from 72% to 74%, and satisfaction with punctuality of the bus stop also rose 2 percentage points to 77%. So urban metropolitan areas did tend to see a rise. So on average, they also rose 2 percentage points on these measures. So this again just starts to reflect where punctuality is driving overall satisfaction. There's lots of other questions in the survey that have some influence on this. So passengers were reporting this year compared to last year that the wait time has decreased, particularly in peak periods and in city and town suburbs. There are, of course, still delays and traffic. I don't think it'll be hard to get rid of it completely, but the proportion of journeys with a delay has reduced a really little bit. It's definitely moving in the right directions. One thing that has improved is meeting expectations for waiting times. And this just shows the importance of it isn't just about reducing traffic and delays, but also about managing the information before the journey and that real-time information on the journey, particularly at the bus stop. So managing expectations of wait time improves perceptions of punctuality and wait time, and then ultimately improves the overall passenger satisfaction. So, and Scotland also, we saw that big jump in overall satisfaction. In Scotland, there was also increases in satisfaction with punctuality and wait time at the bus stop. So these were all really good, positive news stories. Everything's going in the right direction. I'm going to hand over to Robert now to talk about satisfaction with value for money.
Thank you, Becky. I like the way you've now put that up to me to handle the not such easy story to talk about. So value for money. I mean, any of you that have seen our report will know and already that satisfaction with value for money has decreased in England. I think what's important to say is that it's the only one of the kind of our key measures that has gone that direction. All the others have improved, and despite this decrease in level of satisfaction for value for money, overall journey satisfaction has still improved. So I think it's quite important to remember that, and partly we'll see from that the analysis that Becky was showing there about what's the biggest impact on value on the overall journey satisfaction score, and value for money wasn't coming out strongly in that. And I think the fact that we've seen on average seen them going in the opposite directions was probably partly indicates why you wouldn't expect to see that a strong relationship going on there. But a headline measure is one is one thing on this. There's a lot of detail behind all this. Really important to remember that this is only asked of fare payers. We don't ask non-fare payers what they think of the value for money. So all those other measures you might be putting in place to give discounted, or certainly free journeys for different age groups that might fall into this is something that won't be in the value for money rating. We only talk to people aged 16 plus. So again, it won't count any kind of child fare options that you've got. So really important to remember the context of this. And I suppose we've talked a bit about the seeing things come through, the improvements we've seen in punctuality, for example, potentially are long-term measures that we've been putting in place and take a while to get there and for passengers to notice them. We can't deny the fact that there obviously was a change in England in the single fare cap, going from £2 universally to £3 in many areas, but potentially different ones locally. And a way that's instantly visible to passengers, same as any other fare changes, we're not just talking about singles here, is a bit different to potentially getting the sense that your punctuality has improved over time. So important to think about that too. We've got to remember also that the type of ticket that people buy is going to be relevant for the journeys they're making. So obviously a lot of the noise and the talk is about what's changed on the single fare, but a lot of the people taking part in our survey, they're regular travellers, so they may be travelling 3, 4, 5 days or more per week. So they don't necessarily going to be that they're going to be using a single ticket. So important to remember other fare types. We've seen overall this decline of 10 percentage points in England since last year. So we've actually fallen back below the level of satisfaction with value for money that we had in 2023. So we've gone up from 67 up to 73 and back down now to 63. And I suppose in psychological terms, thinking purely about the single fare cap, if you've given someone something and now you've slightly taken it away, that's a psychologically different story to not having had a chance to have that offer in the first place. So some things around that. So satisfaction with day passes is actually lower than it is with singles. So it isn't just about singles. Both of those have dropped down quite a bit since 2024. And the story with single fares is different and vary. We still see that the value for money for single fares tends to be higher than the period passes, so the weeklies, the monthlies, and things like that. But the differential between those two, in terms of how they're seen for value, has decreased between 2024 and 2025. But it's a lot of local stories, and we know that there are different fare systems in place in some authority areas where they've kept either a £2 or a £2.50 fare, and there's a huge variation locally in those ratings of value for money, even for single fares. So there's a lot of play here, and we're just touching the surface of it in what we're showing here at a sort of more national level. We also seen that younger passengers rating value for money lower, and that seems to be the case across different ticket types. Whereas in the situation where there are over 65s who are paying for their fare, they tend to rate value for money higher across all different ticket types as well. So in the case of single tickets, 59% of those aged 16 to 25 who bought single tickets were satisfied with value for money, and that went up to 72% for the next age category, 26 to 64-year-olds, and even higher, over 80% for those aged 65 or over. Now, some of that is interlinked with the fact that those passengers may be travelling at different times of day, different types of journey, all sorts of things in the mix there. So a lot going on. Interestingly, what we have seen is that between 2023 and 24, the satisfaction with value for money of single fares didn't really increase that much, but I think we saw a shift in who was using, what types of ticket people were using. So potentially people moved into using single fares where the £2 cap was in place, and maybe they've stuck with that in a way that and slightly different behaviours to what we saw before. In Scotland, slightly different picture. We've seen value for money is at the same level, stuck at 75% in 2025 compared to the previous year. But behind that general level of stability, we've seen actually improved satisfaction in value for money of day passes, gone up quite significantly, whereas there were some slight declines in other things like these period passes, so the weeklies and the monthlies have dropped down. So the overall effect of that was to keep things the same, but it isn't just a one simple picture. It's all quite complex going behind there and what's going on. And certainly there's a lot of local stories in this beyond the national picture. Bucking the trend on value for money is Greater Manchester in England, where they've actually seen an improvement in value for money. It's gone from 72% in 2023 to 72 to 73, and now to 79%. One case where it's gone in the opposite direction. But again, there are local factors going on at place there. One of the things we asked people is what was the main reason why they gave their value for money rating. Here we've just picked out those people that said they were not satisfied with value for money. So that could be dissatisfied, it could be neither nor on it. And we asked them to pick from this list the kind of things that they think. And the primary reason coming through for being dissatisfied in some way with value for money is the fact how cost of fares has changed between the previous 12 months. Now that comes through a bit each year, but it's come through more strongly in 2025 than it did in 2024. So it's gone up to just over a third of people who were dissatisfied with value for money who've picked that out as being the reason, and a slight fall off in the one that normally comes through quite strongly, which is the cost for the distance travel. which come through each way. And that can also be the flip side for those who rate value for money highly. That often is the cost for distance travel. It comes out as one of the top reasons for that being why they're rated that way. So a short journey of a few stops for one fare is a bit different from the same fare for a much longer journey. So yeah, all part and parcel of the picture that we're seeing. So an area that we've been looking at, and you're seeing in the report, is the area of personal safety and security. So one of the things that we've seen is that there's been a general drop-off in ratings of personal safety and security as being good. So this is a slightly different scale we use on this question. We got people to rate things from good to poor, and personal security at the bus stop in England has dropped since last year. So we got just over two-thirds of people rating it as very or fairly good, which is down from 3/4 the previous year. We see differences in the types of areas, so that is lowest in the urban, metropolitan and rural areas, whilst passengers tend to feel the most safe at bus stops in semi-rural areas. So I think we've seen some things that are potentially societal, and the fact that it's lower at bus stops than we see on buses, and so we see personal security on the bus is much higher than that. So it's at 80%, fairly good, but that has dipped off a little bit. So I don't think we're necessarily just seeing this in bus. I think there may be things in other modes as well that's being seen, and obviously it's a topic of interest media-wise in terms of people's safety out and about. So we think some of that is what's feeding into the figures that we've seen in Your Bus Journey. Whereas in Scotland, we're seeing that has also dropped off, but the levels generally are much higher. So ratings of safety at the bus stop, 77% of passengers there, and on the buses at 88%, so that much higher. One thing that we have seen consistently is a difference by different categories of passenger, in both England and in Scotland. Disabled passengers are more like to say that they were worried or concerned in some way about the behaviour of other passengers on the journey, more so than for non-disabled passengers. This is definitely a piece of work that we're going to do more on. It's going to be one of our kind of themes that we're going to look at in more detail to try and unpick some of this and work out what is going on behind the figures. And yeah, it's been interesting to look at comparisons with other modes and also what experience local authorities have where they've done other work in this area too. And continuing the theme of the differences between passenger types and disabled and non-disabled, Becky mentioned this a bit earlier on. We're seeing a slight increase in what we're calling the satisfaction gap between disabled and non-disabled passengers. So it's gone up from 3 percentage point difference in 2024 up to 4 percentage point difference in the latest year. Both of them have improved, but the gap between the two, so it's been a bigger improvement for non-disabled passengers than for disabled passengers. In Scotland, there was no difference between the two on the overall journey satisfaction score, but we've now seen a slight difference between those two coming through in the latest year's survey. So again, this is something that we were going to look at to find out a bit more what's behind all this, to really understand what's going on. But for contextual purposes, it's useful to explain what we mean by disabled passengers. So this is self-defined. In the survey, we asked people whether they had disabled and which type of disability they may have had. And we see that just over a quarter of passengers' journeys in England, we had responses were from disabled passengers, and it was 22% in Scotland. What's really interesting that we see is dependence on bus for this group, and we see that half of those in taking the journey said that they didn't have any choice to travel by any other means. So we asked for people why they chose to make their journey by bus, and one of those options is that they had no other option, and we get half of them saying that in this case. It may not depend what you might think about whether there are options around disabled passes, but over half of the disabled passengers were paying for their bus travel based on this self-defining version of disability. And that was across all age groups. We get people with disabilities, but it was obviously slightly more with the older groups than we do for non-disabled passengers. But I think potentially one thing we're going to look at is the type of disability by age groups and see how the pattern of these may vary. So amongst those across both England and Scotland in this term, you can see the categories that came through. So we've got a mixture of those around the kind of the more obvious physical disabilities, the mobility, the hearing and vision, and then we've got others around things like mental health and social behavioural things. So it'll be interesting to look at some of those, particularly perhaps by age, to see how those vary and what differences in opinions of the journey that those passengers have. I think we're generally seeing that on the kind of more opinion-based questions that we see sort of lower scores for disabled passengers and non-disabled, but on the more factual type questions, we don't necessarily see such the same difference. But we know that there are, as Becky mentioned earlier, some kind of interrelationships there between like when passengers are traveling, does that influence more than what type of passenger they are? So there's a lot really to dig detail in further on this. So it's definitely something we're going to come back to in the future and look at that in more detail. And talking of the future, earlier on, David showed you the slide that kind of said, what on earth is your bus journey? What's it all about? Just to bring you back up to speed on where we are with the 2026-27 survey, what's different about that? So we're now talking about coverage for all authority areas in England, outside London, as well as having both Scotland, 6 regions, and Wales, 4 regions as well. So we're expecting somewhere in the region of 70,000 responses for the 26-27 survey. We're sticking to the same process of how we recruit people, so it means it's still know that people are making a journey. It's inclusive. David earlier mentioned the fact that we have paper versions of the survey. The other way in which it's inclusive is we're out there where people are making journeys. They don't have to be on a panel. They don't have to be signed up to anything. If they're out there making a journey and they bump into one of our interviewers, then they can be part of the survey. So in that way, it's inclusive in other ways too. We've updated the content a little bit, not majorly changing the survey, so we keep those trends going through, but we have put some new questions in around real-time information. We've done a little bit of work around the antisocial behaviour and accessibility topic areas. And to help perhaps understand some of the responses we're getting, particularly in some of those areas, we've got some extra questions that we're putting into the online survey to try and dig into what's behind the ratings that people are giving and what they mean by some of the responses they're giving. So that will be really helpful when we come to interpreting the next year's results. The fieldwork is now slightly different. So we've gone from a calendar year survey, we're now into a financial year survey. So we're just starting in now in April with the 26-27 survey, and that will run through until March next year. But we can retain all the elements of benchmarking. In fact, with the expanded coverage of the survey, it's going to be even greater chance to benchmark between similar types of authorities and compare, and then use that information to see how investment is going. With that, I think I'm handing back over to David.
You're on mute, David, I think.
Thanks very much, Robert. Apologies for that. And that takes us on to how the results are working for people. And we want these to be active, and we want these to be engaged with and be useful in providing that next steps and that focus on the passenger experience. So how people are actually using the results at the moment, they're in the process of digging deeper into those local results that we've shared with individual areas and with operators. And that's about understanding what is or what isn't working for passengers. And that measures up with the investments that they're making to see whether those tangible results are being delivered for passengers, but also with the resources that they have, putting a focus on what matters to passengers the most is something that will ultimately shift the dial for those passengers and provide information to decision makers with those who are actually charged with both paying for and delivering those services. But also with it happening across so many areas with the same methodology and the same kind of results coming out, that consistency. They're taking the opportunities to compare themselves with others across the country and to learn from the experience of others. And that's not just about what's going well and sharing that good practice, which obviously has those kinds of benefits, but also to understand where others are going through challenges and how they might be trying to meet those challenges so that those experiences can be shared as well. One thing that areas have been doing over a number of years is incorporating that that understanding and that knowledge from your bus journey into passenger satisfaction targets in things like bus service improvement plans, and using that measurement then to see year on year how that is measuring up. And we work with a number of authority areas, we have been doing over a number of years, to see how that is actually working and providing that support and engagement for those measurements and for that guidance and support with them. And also areas are encouraged to work together with each other, but also with their partner operators and with the representative organisations, with CPT, Bus Centre of Excellence, Album, and a whole host of other organisations that are out there to work together on targeted initiatives, because the ultimate outcome is to improve that experience for those groups that have lower satisfaction. We've been through some of those in the results that you've seen today. So the experience of people with disabilities, for example, but also young people. We find that particularly in some of the metropolitan areas, younger people are more sensitive, potentially harder to please. So looking at the initiatives that are working in different places can be really helpful to have that shared understanding. But also then we want to understand what's happening. We want to be able to join in with sharing that good practice and those challenges with others. So our engagement team are out and about talking with the areas and operators in terms of the measures that are being put in place, and also what they're finding as a result of that, and how those local results are panning out and emerging for those areas. So we'd really encourage those conversations with our engagement team. They can then bring those results back to the centre, and we can help to share those, and we will be doing this on a regular basis in terms of the what we're going to be sharing in the coming months, and hopefully we can build some of that into those sessions. So just as we move on to talking about that, I'll hand over to Louise.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Robert and Becky. Really interesting. And I guess we'll move on to questions that are in the chat in a minute. But one of the things that really struck me when I first saw the results this year was just that the progress we're seeing in the 2025 survey, where we've seen satisfaction really go up, is actually the result of things that started happening, you know, a couple of years before, isn't it? And things are quite slow to show through in this satisfaction data. So to me, it was really heartening to see some of the early work under the bus service improvement plans that has taken a while to deliver, but now really being recognised. And, you know, you see that particularly in punctuality, don't you? And my sense is, and interested to know what, you know, local authorities who are much closer to this, but my sense is that there's more improvement to come here as we see more from, you know, bus priority measures and other work to really kind of tackle that coming through. So it'll be really exciting to see what next year brings. And of course, there are some areas that where work is needed, and particularly interesting to see that kind of slightly slow increase in satisfaction among disabled passengers. And you know, I know lots of people are really keen to to think about how they can tackle that. So there's loads of good stuff anyway that we can talk about in the coming months. And I suppose just to say again, really reiterating what David has said, we can only do so much in terms of showing national results, can't we? You know, it is still relatively high level. We want to help you get into the detail and really use your local results. So, you know, don't be shy about coming forward and asking for us to help you do that. We're going to be holding more webinars in the coming months. We'll be doing deeper dives into some of these data areas. And we'd really love to hear from local authorities and from operators about how the results are being put to work. So if you think that you've got something that'd be useful to share, then please get in touch, and we'd love to involve you in a future webinar. Just before we move on to the Q&A, it's worth me mentioning that the results of the 2025 survey will be on the Data Hub in May, and so that will give the ability to analyse, and that partly picks up one of the questions in the chat. So that ability to really interrogate the data at a more detailed level, and we'll hold a session once we've uploaded the data to help talk you through that and show how it works. And again, we're always happy to talk individually with you about it if anyone's, you know, struggling with using that. And we'll hold a separate session for authorities in the 2026 survey once we've got 3 months of results. That's on a separate dashboard, but to help you log in and see the early results of the New Year's survey as they start coming through. Right, so let's go to the chat then and just pick up a few questions from there. So I think one that is worth picking up, and we're going back a bit here, Becky, if you can come in on this one. So Donalyn Morris has asked a question, a really good question, about the urban metropolitan areas and the profile of passengers contributing to that. And it's we said exactly the same thing, didn't we, last year? So urban metropolitan areas were struggling, but that is significantly because of the profile of people within that area who are using the bus. So more commuters, more people travelling at peak time, younger profile. So do you want to just add anything to that, Becky?
I mean, yeah, basically it's what you've been saying. It is a younger profile. There is more peak journeys. But on the opposite side of that, there's also actually often shorter journeys, so that better value for money or less other problems. But yeah, it is the profile, and I think that's one of the key reasons why we don't just talk about an England average, because when you're comparing yourself to other areas, you want to be comparing to similar areas, and that's why those 4 categories are so useful, because then you are comparing yourself to areas which have similar kind of makeup or similar bus system. But also, yeah, when you're thinking about targeted improvements for areas, it is thinking about who those passengers are and like when those pinch points or issues with satisfaction are. So I mean, yeah.
Thanks, Becky. And it has been really interesting, hasn't it, to see this year that, yes, despite the still sort of suppressed satisfaction compared to other areas, the considerable increase that urban metropolitan areas have been able to make is really encouraging. So hopefully see more of that next time.
And really driven by satisfaction improvements in punctuality, journey wait time, and that has been quite a lot across those urban areas. The younger people less so. I mean, that would be an area where it'd be more interesting to hear whether any areas have done anything specifically targeted at that group, but that's a bit harder to target an age group than a time of day.
Yeah, but that is the sort of thing, Becky, where if people are seeing in their local results things that sort of book these national trends, where they're having really kind of positive performance among kind of the younger passengers, you know, it would be really good to have conversations with you about what you're doing and what's working, so that we can help share that a bit more widely. And I'm sticking with the same point, Becky, because it's linked. The question from Stuart Chandler about setting out the categorisation of the rural, semi-rural, urban, met, etc. Good to know the anticipated baseline for the year ahead. And I guess maybe we could send out with these slides, rather than get into too much detail now, but if we could kind of help explain a little bit. And I know it's not an exact science, is it, categorising areas in the first place, but if we could try and maybe add a tiny bit of context, you can maybe do a little bit of context now on the call, And then I wonder whether it would be useful to send out the groupings for 2026 so people know not just what was in each area for 2025, but know what would be in each, what will be in each area for 2026.
So Robert probably is best to explain where it came from, but we have already categorised each of the areas. So every area in England is categorised, and it is just England, it's not Scotland or Wales. So into one of those 4 groups, we have done it. We have let them know, but it was ages ago when we sent the initial kind of information about the survey. So we can talk to any areas about that. I think one of our sort of controversial points or points for the 26 survey is actually what we're going to do with some of the areas that have become combined areas. So we've got places like East Midlands, where like Derbyshire, Derby, Notts County and Nottingham, where we've got a real mixture of urban and rural, and how we're going to categorise them. So we are talking to some areas about it already, but yeah, happy to have that conversation with anyone. But Robert, you're probably best to say where it originally came from.
Yeah, I mean, we used the there's, I think it's like a there's an urban classification. There's 6 categories, and there's more categories than that. So we took the original kind of 6 category definitions and then pulled that slightly together to make 4, probably because it was in terms of having a reasonable number in each benchmarking group. But yeah, we've got some details on that. We can potentially put that in when we send those out around. But yeah, it was using like a government standard set of classifications, and even then it was slightly subjective, where it may have been done at a lower level of authority, and we were trying to combine them together to get a broader one. So we've got that issue again now, even with kind of quite big authority areas now that they're being combined as well. So it's partly a judgment call and mostly based on those stats and things in the background, but we can send something else around that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And I think the thing to remember with those is that they're useful as a guide, aren't they, to help you see, in a sort of comparable group. But what we would also say is it's probably very useful for you to think about an area that is more comparable to your area and look at how they've done to help understand, because you might see something where, you think, oh, we're really comparable to X area, they've managed to make an improvement, let's go and talk to them and see what they've done. So that's where it can also be pretty useful, as well as the broader categories. Right, let's pick a couple of other things up. Oh yes, John Cartledge, thank you for a good provocative point in there. But absolutely right in terms of thinking about when we think about different authority areas, how they are run, the politics behind the scenes in those local authority areas, whether they are franchised or non-franchised, all that stuff matters and makes a difference. It has been interesting to see Greater Manchester's results this time. That doesn't mean that will work everywhere. It's not, these results don't say therefore franchising works. That's absolutely not what they're saying. But we'll definitely be giving that more thought in future as we work really closely with local authorities and kind of understanding kind of the situation in their area and some of that wider context. That's going to be really important.
John had another question then about dissatisfaction with personal security and how that varies by different demographics. So yes, that's one area we're really interested about. We are looking at the 25 data, but this is one of the areas where we'll be going into much greater detail in 26. And somebody else asked about where we've added extra questions. So this is around perceptions of personal security and perceptions of antisocial behaviour. We've added some extra questions which people don't have to answer, but they can if they want to, where we're asking like what they mean by personal safety and security and what influence that. And then we'll be going more into the demographics. So it's really interesting. This is kind of this is going to be a bit more of a long term before we can give you greater depth on that, and also in relation to other modes of transport. So I think there is lots coming out, and this is where we've got the advantage of obviously being at Transport Focus and having that insight into different modes. So I think this is a kind of a bit of a multimodal piece when we're looking at that.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. And I think there's two levels to it, aren't there? There is looking into your own local data and really kind of picking apart, especially once it's available on the data hub, and you can go in and understand a bit more about kind of the detail behind it. Absolutely do that so you can understand what it's telling you. And then, yes, wait for our kind of more in-depth work around that, which hopefully will help us all understand it. And part of that is going to be talking to you about things you've been trying in your areas, what you think's been successful, etc. So it's a big topic, isn't it, for everyone in the industry and wider at the moment. Zoe Jones, yes. Email the address on the screen if you don't already have kind of a key contact, and we'll put you in touch with someone who can help you discuss your local results in more detail. Sally Holgate, yeah, so over to the team for this one in terms of I think we have probably shared previously the changes that have taken place for the 2026 questionnaire, but we can certainly reshare those, can't we? So that people can understand. And just to go back a little bit on that, we've really been trying to make sure that we can help people, you know, answer the questions, but part of some of it are the questions that the department are going to be asking you to report on. So we know that when some people were responding to the bus indicator pilots, it was difficult to answer some of the questions because the wording of the survey didn't quite help to answer some of those. Some of it is because things have moved on since we developed the original survey questionnaire. So Becky, sorry, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's really good points. I can share it with Sally. So one of the things for disabled passengers is that the question was right at the end of the survey about what long-term health conditions you have. We've brought it earlier on in the survey, so some people know this and some people won't. We have sort of 12 questions at the beginning of the survey where everyone has to answer, and that's our key metrics, overall satisfaction, age, gender, and now disability. So we're trying to get the maximum number of people to answer those questions. Then we go into all the other rating scales and the more detail. So some people can choose not to answer those. So that's one of the things we're doing, is bringing the disabled like more center stage so that we'll have better data on it as well. And then that will enable us to do additional analysis on their experiences. So the information, the additional analysis we're doing about disabled passengers experience we'll be able to do on the 25 survey. So we're hoping that we'll have more on that this summer, whereas the personal security, where we've added extra questions on that, and on antisocial behaviour, that will be on the 2026 data. So probably not till much later this year when we've got some interim data on that.
Great, thanks, Becky.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, moving through a couple more then. So John Carter's just picking up the point you've just made at the bottom of the chat. Yes, we already do that type of analysis, the key driver analysis, to understand the relative impact of different attributes on overall satisfaction. That's the thing that Becky mentioned earlier, and that we'll be sharing with each individual area. When did you say, Becky, we're sharing that with areas?
So it's ready now. So it will be fed out from engagement managers to their areas over the next few weeks. And actually, Stephen asked me if it was similar. Like, it's pretty similar in most areas for the good journey, with punctuality higher than journey length. But where it does differ, and different areas are different, is on that great journey. And that's quite interesting, because sometimes it's really journey length, sometimes the bus driver is huge, sometimes value for money comes up more then. And so I think that's when areas will be able to look and really help to understand. Like, just looked at a couple, and there's one where bus stop is what makes the great journey. So that can give you an indication of changes that you've already made that are being, like, you know, noticed, or where further improvements can be made.
Yeah, no, that's crucial, isn't it, Becky? Understanding where you differ from the national average is really, really useful.
It is by area. We will be releasing that soon, and then we're hoping to use so maybe some similar things to look at some of the other metrics. So in 2026, we'll obviously have more data available and we'll be able to do better benchmarking. So we might try and use other statistical methods then to maybe look at what's influencing value for money. Actually, is probably the one that we'll take next.
Okay, great. Thanks, Becky. I'm going to come to Robert's one, so this next one to give Becky a break here. And so Daniel Law's failing you to bus and your bus journey. Why do we collate data in periods rather than calendar months? Because it can be trickier to update and collate for quarterly reports.
I think Daniel's referring to where we put it into the dashboard, which we've been doing like sort of 4-week blocks or something like that, as opposed to like calendar months or anything like that. It's definitely something, I think that's part of, you talked early on about the discussions we're still having around how this all feeds into bus outcomes work. So we were just looking at how we're going to set the dashboard up for the coming year. And one of those questions was, should we stick to this sort of set weeks, or is it monthly, or what's going to be useful for the reporting side? So that's still in discussion at the moment on that side of things, rather than it being done by months or something. So that's something we're looking at.
But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Robert, but I think that we have only previously, although we do put the data in the dashboard on a 4-weekly basis, that is unweighted data, and that is intended just to give you an idea of the direction of travel of results so that you have as quick access to a sense of what's happening. We definitely wouldn't want you to report on that data in the dashboard because, as I say, it's unweighted, and then we weight it every 6 months. That's correct, isn't it, Robert?
Yes.
So on a 6-monthly basis, you get weighted final data that is the data you should use for reporting. We may make changes to that in 2026 and beyond, but that is the current situation. Okay, so Martin's asked an interesting question about satisfaction with technology linked to service information. And Martin, it sounds as though you were in the same conversations that we were in as we were trying to work out exactly what questions to ask in the survey this year, because obviously information's moved on so much, hasn't it, over just even the last few years in terms of what people access and where they access it. So what will we get, Becky, slightly different in terms of the results from 2026 that will be a bit more helpful here, I think?
We've asked, like, when they looked for information. So we actually ask at what state, like pre-planning and on journey planning, what information they used and how satisfied they were with that. And where in the current questionnaire we just talk about information, we've tended to split it into like information that, like, more static information like bus timetables, and then real-time information. So we've specified when it's information, like your bus is 3 minutes away, and to get people to rate that. So there will be more information about like kind of the different types of information, and we've got rating scales on it. And then we've asked what kind of information sources they use pre-planning and during their journey. So yeah, it will be great to have more on that, and then that will also be able to feed into some of our models on overall satisfaction as well. So when we're doing the key driver, because we put it on rating scales, that will all go in there as well. So we'll really start understanding the impact of real-time information and expectations on journey time overall satisfaction as well. But that's like six we'll have something when we have the interim data in 6 months, so October, November time.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going back to pick up Sally's point about the key driver analysis. Have we also done that by the 4 categories?
No, we haven't.
And moral, etc., because that might be really interesting.
It would be really interesting. I've written down that as a note to take away. So no, we haven't, but great idea, and we're definitely going to look into that. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Sally. Right, going back to a couple of the more substantive points then. So, yeah, Andrew Valley's asking a really interesting question about the way weather affects results, which we've talked about again endlessly across all our surveys, haven't we? Both in terms of, the number of people travelling, who's travelling, and what they think about different aspects of the service. And we have had some wet weather and storms, although fortunately for the 26 survey, a lot of it actually happened during the period that this time we weren't surveying, because we switched from a a February to December fieldwork period in 25 to an April to April fieldwork period. So we actually weren't surveying in January and February when I think some of that worse weather happened. So hopefully the weather from April 26 onwards, it's been clement so far, but who knows what will happen later in the year. So it absolutely, it will have an impact at some times.
And I think that's the whole point. We are now going to be interviewing 12 months of the year, 50, well, not 52 weeks. We do give the interviewers 2 weeks off. So we are going to stop over Christmas this year. So, but other than that, 50 weeks of the year. And that's really, there are good weather days, there are bad weather days. I'm pretty sure everybody's in a good mood today. But, and that's why I think that's what really sets this survey apart from some other satisfaction surveys, is the interviewers are out every day from like 6 in the morning till 9-10 o'clock at night. So it's all day parts, weekends, Saturdays, Sundays, in the week, 50 weeks of the year. And so that's why when you take the number over the whole year, it kind of should iron out those issues. So, if you've had a couple of months with really, really bad traffic, or there's been a some sort of service improvement, there's also the other months that where the service is normal and regular, and so hopefully it will take an average. And also that's partly why some of these things where you've made an improvement do take a while to come through in the results, because if you've made an improvement in the first half of the year, your results are obviously for the whole year, so they'll take into account the time before your improvement, during the improvement, and afterwards. So that's why sometimes I think it's like the year after you might get the full impact of any results that have been made.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. And it's really important that we capture passenger experience at all times, of course. So, what's it like for passengers, even when the weather is bad, services may be disrupted, traffic is slower, all that type of thing. So that is important. But it's also one of the reasons that looking at the 4 weekly data in the dashboard can be useful, because even though it is only indicative, you might want to go in and look at a month and see, yeah, okay, so maybe satisfaction has dipped a bit, but that you can attribute that to, say, weather and external factors, and think about how to tackle that in future, rather than worrying about what it means overall over the 6-month period. So that can be useful. So Andrew Jeffries asked another interesting question about insight from less regular bus users as to why that might be the case, and whether it could be because they've had more negative experiences than good ones. So a couple of things to say on this, and I guess I don't know, Becky, whether you have this to hand and can say what differences we see in terms of how many days a week people use the bus, and maybe satisfaction of very infrequent users. I'll come back to that, but it is a question that we've explored in kind of one-off research, a number of times, Andrew, and generally it's very interesting that the things that drive the perceptions of non-users are exactly the same as those that drive the perceptions of users on the whole. It is about kind of punctuality and getting the basics right. But we do think that exploring the views of non-users is a really important topic for the year ahead. It's definitely one of the areas that I would like us to look into if we have a chance. So that's the sort of thing that would sit outside of the Your Bus Journey survey, but really complement the work that it does. So I'm not absolutely promising that at the moment, because we don't know exactly what we'll do in the next few months, but it's certainly an area that we're interested in and that needs exploring at some point. So thank you. Becky, do you have anything to say on it, infrequent users?
Yeah, I mean, we in the Your Bus Journey survey, the most important thing, they are all bus users. It's not non-users, but we do ask how regularly they use the bus, and we do ask whether that's the same compared to 12 months ago, like whether they use it more or less. So we haven't done any overall analysis of it. It's something that worked with areas. So we did some work with an area recently, and their results have gone down quite a lot. And one of the things we were looking at with that area is whether their profile of passengers has changed, which of course, as fare changes change, you lower your fares, you attract more people on. You've got people who are not such regular users, or who have a car, they're not being forced to use it, and satisfaction definitely does change with those people and with their experience of it, whether they are used to using public transport, or whether they've been forced onto it or chosen to be on it. So I mean, it's something we could definitely maybe try and give a bit more of an overall picture, I guess, so that when areas are looking at their own data, they can help to understand it. But it's definitely something that if you're trying to understand your results in an area, it is worth looking at your profile of passengers and to see how that's changed from previous years or from national averages.
Yeah, interesting point, thanks. And just sticking with the same point, I see Simon, you put a comment in along similar lines about non-users, and it's interesting that you pick up those kind of wider reasons that people might not use the bus. So it's not necessarily all about what the bus itself is doing. It could be about other kind of, say, town centre policies and things around parking, and that's exactly the type of area that, say, with Transport Focus's Enhanced Roam in the future, we might be able to come and have some really good conversations with local authorities about what you think are some of the wider factors impacting on bus and bus use in your area. So that's a useful point. Thank you.
I mean, just while you're looking at the next one, so we have one question. So everything is about the journey they've just taken. We have one question at the end, which is about perceptions. So that then has perceptions about like how accessible is your the bus services in your area, the value for money, whether they go to the right places. So that's a bit more of that perception things. Obviously, it is just people who use the bus, but the idea being is that question potentially, if Transport Focus starts doing other things, or we could use that same kind of perception question in a survey with non-users to help maybe understand it. So it's kind of, yeah, one that we'd like to do as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think we've probably pretty much picked up all the questions in the chat. So I hope that's been useful, whether you've been an area that's been working with us on survey for several years, or whether you're new to it and looking ahead to how you'll use the survey in 2026. And if you are new to survey and a bit unsure, that email address, yourbusjourney@Transport Focus, you can email that, and any questions that you've got, we're happy to answer. And at some point you'll be assigned a specific engagement manager who will work closely with you and be able to answer any questions that you've got, share results, all that type of thing, and we'll try and walk you through the process. So thanks to Becky and Robert and David for presenting today. That's been really interesting, and thanks to everyone who's taken the time to attend and for actually that really interesting conversation in the chat. I've enjoyed it, so thanks very much everyone.